So today we're going to cover keeping your documentation in sync with your designs, talking about the relationship between the designer using SolidWorks and the individual using Composer. When I say individual, it could be also a designer, could be your documentation department, could be just someone who's been assigned the task within your organization. So before we get started, I have just kind of some polls to get an idea, the group that we have online and the kind of things that you're currently doing. So first question, do you use digital photos in your current documents that you create? If you could just vote for me. And I'll wait a second to get people's votes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close and share that. I know not everyone voted here, but pretty much everyone's using some form of pictures at this point. So taking that to the next step, do you use CAD screenshots within your documentation? This is kind of that next step. You've got the 3D designs. Are you taking advantage of that and using them within your documentation? Let me go ahead and close the poll here and show you what we're looking at. So most of you are at least taking advantage of the fact that you do have 3D CAD. Some of the things that we can discuss with this is that relationship. You may be the engineer doing that, but you may not be. So you might have to go back and forth to engineering and have a discussion as to, hey, can you rotate the model this way? Can you explode it this way? Can you snap the screenshot? So there tends to be some difficulties from time to time to making an efficient communication line between the two groups. So next question. All right. And I lost my question. How many documents do you or your organization create a year, estimation-wise? If we could just and notice my fourth answer there. Go ahead and vote. We'll go ahead and close this and show what we're looking at. So as far as a cross-section of the group online, a lot of you are making too many of these documents. Again, it probably seems like there's millions of them because you're constantly creating and updating because of the tools that you currently have. And my final question, and probably the most important based upon our content today, what happens when your designs change? And this is multiple choice. You may do one or many of these things or none of them at all. Your designs change, and that's the world we live in. How do we go and perform those updates? Do you retake photos, go back to engineering, or you're the engineer, have to open up the CAD model again, resave the screenshots? You don't get the exact same image, so then you got to re-put labels and arrows and all the other things associated with that. Let me just share this. So it's pretty good cross section here. People doing all different things to keep things up to date, and they're all based upon the tools that you have to get it done. So on to our presentation. Keeping documentation in sync. Our focus today is to discuss how we can make that better. My name is Kevin Holbrook. I work for CAD Dimensions, and I have also Lars Christensen, who also works for CAD Dimensions. We're going to kind of play a dual role here today. I'm going to work as a designer in SolidWorks and actually make some changes, and we're going to see how he can incorporate those changes into the documentation cycle. But first, I want to just talk a little bit about the process. You may have seen this slide on other presentations. It gives us a good sense as what that process is for creating documentation. Engineering has to design the product. You have to create technical graphics. That goes into the technical documentation and out to the customer. The issue is that there's so many things that are involved in this process. If you're using 3D CAD, you're taking pictures or screenshots. Maybe you take them into Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator and add arrows and text, or you take them directly into Word, and then you put them in some sort of publishing tool. In the case of our demonstration today, we're going to put them into Word, but you might be using InDesign and Publisher to actually put those images into your final documentation, and then you're going to output maybe a PDF, and it goes on the server or directly to the customer. It's a very serial process. Now, that serial process requires you to wait for the previous step to be completed before you can move on to the next step. So if your concept phase of your design takes longer than it should, you've already pushed out your documentation cycle because you have to wait for all these other steps to complete. What we're going to show today is how you can truly start your documentation so much earlier in the process and still get what you're looking for, but much, much quicker. Now, here's an example of probably what some of your documents look like today. Lots of text, pictures with text, exploded views that are really, really busy. You have to look and really get an idea of what the arrows and balloons are pointing at. And not to say that it's bad, but the quality is not as good as it possibly could be by using tools like Composer and SolidWorks to do that. Here's an example of low quality and not effective. The pictures are great, the quality of the pictures are great, but what is it really saying? Can you really understand what you're trying to get across with the documentation? Okay, what happens if your customer cannot understand them? Okay, can they call your customer support and get answers? Well, they may just get frustrated with your project or your product and forget about it. What happens if they speak another language? Okay, if you have a lot of text, you got to translate it. Okay, if you don't translate it, maybe they don't understand what they're looking at. And then what happens if they're not accurate? We talked and asked the question about changes. If your documentation doesn't match your product, again, people get frustrated. It's a quality thing. So when you look at all the tools involved in creating documentation, there seems to be a lot of different tools embedded in that process. And this is how I think of it. You don't have that one tool to go after this big project. It's like taking this saw to this tree. What you really need is a tool that looks just like this, that kind of has all the little widgets that you need to get it done. And you just pick the one you need and you move on. So that's kind of what we're looking at today with Composer. Now, some of the questions that Composer can answer, things like what does it look like? How does it work? You've all had somebody come up to you and say, hey, can you write something up to describe how this thing works in our product? Well, Composer can help you with that. And then what we're going to talk to today is how do we keep them up to date? And how can I share with others? So our presentation today is going to be on this assembly. Let me take you into SolidWorks for a moment and just give you a brief description of what we're looking at. Now, obviously, this assembly does not match that image that I just showed you. That's because we're real early in the R&D phase or the design cycle. We don't have a lot of things in place. I've placed a lot of the fittings into the assembly. I know I need to route all my tubing and piping for the assembly. Now, what this is a track setting machine for spacing out railroad tracks to position them the proper spacing and align the fastening of the tracks directly over the railroad ties. And this is something that a couple individuals would walk down the track to be able to lay track down. So we're real early in this design process. So first thing I'm going to do is give the opportunity for the person doing the documentation to be able to access this data. Now, like I said, we're going to be doing kind of a two-headed thing today, so I'm going to go ahead and toss this on over to my coworker, Lars Christensen, who's going to take this to the next step.
All right. Thank you very much, Kevin. I hope everybody is able to also hear me. So, as Kevin said, Kevin is in the middle of designing this thing, and he kind of like laid things out, and I am then going to be taking the process and be working on the documentation with this with Composer. So what I have here is really what Kevin just had inside of SolidWorks. I have that in Composer. Now, to bring that stuff in is really just going into File Open and go into your SolidWorks files in here, and you will see that the Composer can bring a lot of different things in, and of course including in our case here SolidWorks. The only reason on webinars it takes maybe a couple of minutes, a minute or so to update these files, and on doing a webinar, 30 seconds seems like eternity. So we're just going to kind of like jumping in and out here a little quicker. But really, as you can see here, there's a lot of different formats that Composer can bring in. So you really doesn't have to worry too much about that aspect of it. And you're just bringing that SolidWorks file in. You will see inside of a Composer here that it's very, it's nice and easy laid out. It's really like we have the ribbon bar up here that we are familiar with from Windows program, and kind of like also from SolidWorks with the different tabs. We can switch between stuff like that. We also down here actually have the assembly view, because that's one of the neat things about Composer is that it's not just pretty pictures. It really has that data, as we're going to see today, from our solid model, so we can use a lot of that stuff. But I'm going to start out with this part here with some documentation. What is really neat about this is that think of it like a digital camera. So many of you guys right now go out to the shop floor and snap some pictures or taking screenshots. Well, in this case here, I have the model here that we can see here, and all I really need to do is just hit the button over here and I snap a digital picture of it. So we can see that that appears over here as a view. And again, if I click on anywhere, I have full control with properties, and you will see that today, that you really have, the control over these images. I can quickly here go out and I can turn backgrounds off. We can also go into the render tab up here, and I can turn off the grounds and stuff like that. And when I'm happy with what I have, well, I just snap another picture and I get another view of that. So Kevin is right now working on the design. He's trying to get all his components in SolidWorks put together, and I'm just going to get going here with my design process, or my layout of my documentation here. So while Kevin is working on that, I'm looking at that I have this cooling unit here that I would like to show how we take this thing apart. So you will see down here that it's held by these nuts down here and these bolts, and there's actually 4 of them here. And since I'm inside of here, I really got some neat rendering tools. I can quickly go in here and change the view of this here, make it a little bit more crisp, a little bit more sharp and stuff like that. So that's some of the neat things that you have inside of Composer, is that you have these quick rendering things in here. Now another thing I would like to show on here is that we need to screw this bolt off. So I'm going to go in at this nut. So I'm going to go in here and just click and throw in an arrow. Now what you will see is that this arrow snaps, and that's really one of the neat things about this product, is that though that we're using it for documentation, it knows this. It has this intelligence that it knows the components in that. You can see how it's sitting on the center line here, and when I click on this arrow, I actually have all the control of this arrow over here to the lower left. Like I can go over here and I can change the radius of the arrow. You will see how on the screen how it quickly changes. I can quickly go in and change that. I can choose opacity here, so I can make it kind of like go away, or in my case here, I like to have it sharp. I can also go over on the arrow itself, and I can grab things and I can move things around. So very quickly in this process here, I can really show what I have going on here. And this is a pretty good, that I think that most people would understand that this nut needs to be screwed off here. But looking at it here in this view, it could be a little hard to just kind of like really understand where about on the whole model we are. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, And I'm going to use a tool in Composer called the Digger. And really what I do is I hit spacebar on my keyboard, and I get this little magic tool here. I can move around. Now, this here has a lot of different options. I'm just going to go down here. I'm going to drag this center over here. And as you can see that happens in my screen, automatically I get a little magnifying glass that, of course, I can control completely where I'm going to go ahead here and show this. Now, this tool has all the options. There's like an onion peel, and there's like x-rays. But this here, I think, shows pretty well what I like. So I'm just going to snap a quick picture of this, and it will automatically put in a 2D image of here that, of course, now I can move around that and place it where I think I want to place it here. I can also work on my model and move that around. You'll see that Composer here is fully aware of, that we snap that image into that. On top of that, I might want to use some of the other tools that we have inside of Composer to quickly apply other instructions. So in my case here, I have an image library, and this is all just different bitmaps that you can download from anywhere. Many of these comes with the software. You can go out and you can find these all kinds of places. And I got a little wrench down here that I might not just drag and drop that one in to my picture here. And again, when I get in here, I get all the tools to move it or make it, maybe I want to resize it a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. And I might also, just to finalize this here, add a little bit of some 2D text in here. So maybe there's 4 bolts, so maybe we just make it a little bit easier, make it 4. And again, down in this property down here, we really got control of pretty much anything we like. So I think that this image here shows pretty well that we have 4 nuts we have to screw off and even what tool to use. So when I'm happy with this, well, I just snap another picture, and we will see that I got those work instructions in there. I'm just going to jump back to my previous view here and make another quick view here that just to kind of like show again this cooling device what we're up against. So let me just go over here and align my camera with the front face of this part here. So we got a view here. Zoom in a little bit, and again, the lighting on these components is really easy with the rendering tab in here to just go in and quickly show, what we want to look at, how we want to look at it. And I'm going to show you a couple of other illustrations in a little bit. So here we got the cooling device that I want to select. Now, earlier I was talking about how we have the whole assembly tree that Kevin is working with inside SolidWorks. I can use that just like we pretty much can inside SolidWorks. I can select a component, and you will see over to the left that it gets highlighted. Okay, so again, Composer knows the whole structure of this. And actually, one of the neat things about Composer is if I use my back arrow, on my left side arrow, I actually can go back through this assembly, and you'll see that now it actually selected the whole assembly. And again, I can go through here. There might be the 4 screw that this thing is screwed into. I don't want to display those. I can just quickly uncheck those there. So quick select is right in here. And now to explode this, I just right click and I just hit the explode button here. I get a little nice triad, and I can now make that exploded view right up there the way I like it. Now I maybe just want to correct that a little bit and show that that's the next step after you have loosened those 4 screws. Maybe to make that a little bit more clear, I'm going to place an arrow here. So I'm just going to go down here and place an arrow like you saw before. And again, these arrows, we got the full control down in the lower left down here, right? So I can, of course, change it to the other end. That makes more sense. Again, we had the opacity. I like to have mine full here. I might even go over here and just maybe make the arrow a little heavier this way here. Another thing that I really like about this feature here is I can actually tell it not to stay on top, and now we can kind of like see how it floats in here. So, if you saw the first picture where we unscrewed the screws, I think that this view here shows very well that now we can lift the part out. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and snap another picture. Now, snapping these pictures inside Composer, as you can see, it's very easy to make these pictures, but of course I want to use it somewhere, right? and in our case here, we're gonna put it inside of a Word document. So I have this Word document, a template that I'm going to be using, but I want a kind of like a front cover, nice image for my Word document. So I'm going to go back into my first view here that we had before, and just going to kind of like use the nice rendering functions inside of Composer. Just going to make the background a little darker here. Let's go in and turn the ground effects on, some shadows, some mirroring maybe, right? Make it look crisp like that. Maybe also again go over here and make it like technical flat. And you can see how quickly here that I can take that SolidWorks assembly that Kevin is working on and can quickly, make something that I think, looks nice and crisp. And even when I'm in this mode, I can use like SolidWorks kind of commands, like holding down Control here, and I can multi-select components right out of the part here. So I can select these 4 wheels, and maybe in this case here, I go over here and I change. Maybe I want to make them gold, and you'll see they all turn gold. That might be a little bit too much bling for a railroad piece, but maybe we just make them chrome, and you can see how quickly that I can make that kind of images right there. And again, when I'm happy with it, well, what am I going to do? I'm just going to snap another picture. So this is really how easy it is to kind of like create these different pictures. And when it gets to get them into the template of our Word document, let me show it to you here. I got this Word document right here that is just my standard instruction template here. So it's going to open up, and as you can see right now, we really don't have anything in this Word document. But one of the neat things about being inside of Composer is that if I go in here and I just rename my views here, so I can just, that's standard, right? Slow click or F2, and I'm just going to call this one instruction. That's my cover picture, right? And we're going to call this view number 3 here. Slow click. I'm going to call this instruction 1. And let's go over here and call this one instruction 2. So I'm just going to make a few ones here, right? Kevin is still working on the main design, and I'm just starting the documentation. And I'm going to go over to my workshop, and here I can save out these high resolution images. So if I click on that, over here to my right, I get the whole view here, and I can actually just save them all multiple out right away. I can even use intelligence like the names and stuff like that right here, and then I can go ahead here and save them out. So I'm just going to save them out to our instruction folder here, instruction sheet. You can see here these pictures we saw before, and again, within Composer, we can save this out in different formats, right? So we have all the standard TIFF or JPEG or whatever you choose. So I'm just going to save these out here. And as these get saved out, we will see that these images will get populated inside of a folder. And that just takes, a few seconds just to populate the different, for Composer to save the different images out. And just like this here, when we go in and we look at this Word document again, we will now see that we have all these nice images in there. We have our nice cover photo sitting right there, right? And we got our other things. So we really got, kind of like the documentation going on this part here. We have, Kevin is still working on the design, and inside of Composer here, I have already started creating these kind of images. So at this point here, I'm actually going to send it back to Kevin because, like I said, Kevin is still working on this design, and Kevin have some more things that he needs to get done before we can actually start making this product.
Thanks, Lars. So in the design end of this process, the hope is that we don't have to think about what I have to do design-wise to assist the group doing documentation, whether that's you or another individual within your organization. So I'm designing, I'm finishing our product up. So that's what my focus is here. And you can see I've added a lot of the tubing. You can see I've added these assemblies on the end that actually grip the track and centered them out. And then we also have a gripper assembly on the bottom half that I'm kind of still working on a little bit, that actually grabs the railroad tie and moves it forward. So continuing in this process, I can continue to make design changes along the way. And I'm going to do some things to this paddle just to make it maybe a little bit better design. We've done maybe some FEA on this thing, and we know that we need to make some modifications to the physical geometry of it. It needs to be a little bit thicker than what we've been dealing with. So we'll go ahead and make those changes in hopes that it's not going to hurt anything down the line. Again, I'm doing all this because I need to do it for the design purposes, not necessarily for the ability to create documentation better. I'm a designer first, and after that I worry about any needs for a documentation group. So we'll go ahead and add some fillets in here, create a little cutout in the center of this thing. No big deal. Alright, so let's take a look at our assembly from here. What else do we want to do? So created some cutouts, maybe checking our gripper pad sizes here. Maybe we'll make some adjustments to this. Alright, I'm going to change this little plate in here because those might contact a little bit later on when we do close and actuate this. And last thing I want to do in here is to add some text onto the part itself, just to describe something, maybe a corporate logo or something. Modify my font. So again, I'm working along like I would as a designer with without regard to what I have to do for the design phase of the process. So we'll make sure that this is seen in the documentation when we do push it back to Lars. Now, another thing that you do in the design phase that again can be utilized down the road, which Lars will show you, is filling out custom properties. Now, inside of SolidWorks, we have a tool called design or assembly visualization that allows me to see custom properties, and you can see that I've kind of started this, but it's not my concern at this point. I'm just gonna kind of leave it where it's at, and I'll come back to that when I get to the next step of the design. Now, I also want to show how this thing sits on the tracks. So I've also put in here some components that show the tracks and how the trolley sits on the tracks and the gripper assembly, so we can kind of get a better look for my drawings, my engineering drawings, to understand what's going on there. And the last thing I need to do is go ahead. I have some lights on this thing because we have some folks that may be working in the evening. I could go ahead and maybe insert new components to do that as well. So let's go ahead and find what I'm looking for here. And there's a light assembly in here, right here. And it's just typical SolidWorks from here. We're going to go ahead and place it in. We're going to mate it. And now I have, let's say, the next step in my assembly. Now, I don't have to choose at this point to send this to the documentation group. I just continue along with my process, continue my design, and save my work. Now let's see what Lars has to do to take it the next step.
All right. Unmute myself, and really, it's when I'm coming to the point where they have gone by, or I lost my patience with where Kevin is in his process, or maybe he even is kind enough to let me know. Really, all I do is I will go out and I will update. It's literally under Files, Updates. And here I will just go out here and say SolidWorks compose a document. And again, here I can go to that direction wherever the changes he made in here. And if I go down here, you will actually see that one of the neat things about when you bring things in here, again, I got all the different variables down here. You can go and select the assembly or whatever. And when I select the component here, I can even check that Kevin haven't been messing around with configurations and stuff like that. So that's really neat. So again, I bring this update in, and we will see that now when I bring it in here, and again, this is our cover image, we can see that we now got the track and we got all the different components to it. If we zoom in here, we can actually see that we have the text and the changes that Kevin did. So we got all these in here. But before I get back to that documentation I was working on before, another really neat thing about Composer is also that we can make videos. We can make, play by AVI, save it out in different formats and stuff like that. And so before I get back to the documentation we started, I just want to show quickly how we can kind of like do that. And again, they really, have made this easy. Pretty much, I'm just going to go back to my cover image here. That was the cover image that we saw before. And maybe I'm just going to change it a little bit here. And I'm just going to snap a couple of quick photos for this here. So I'm just going to go back here and snap a photo here. So this is going to be, it's going to be view 6. I'm thinking that I also would like a video shot here that goes on the front of this thing, because I know that Kevin made some changes to that bottom track down here. So I like that, and I'm going to take and make grab a quick shot of that. Also, what I really want to like to show in the video is we have some neat handles here. See these handles right here, and they can actually move up and down if you loosen one of these screws up. So maybe I want to show that in my video too. So let me just snap another picture of that, and then maybe a good view of those handles will go up, would be a nice side view here. So maybe if I just slide that in there and snap a view about that. So what I have done here is I've just snapped a few views, right? We have the different kind of like views here. So to turn that into an actual video, well, I click the button here to switch over to my animate mode here, and I actually can get a timeline up here. And anybody in SolidWorks who played with animation in SolidWorks knows kind of like the idea behind it, having a timeline down here. We got the different seconds. What I do in Composer is really I just take these views I have over here and I just drag them down to where I want them. So view 6 is going to be the first beginning there, and the second maybe going to come a couple seconds later. So you can just see here how I really just can snap these different views just down on my timelines. I'm going to leave a couple of seconds between each of them and just kind of like drop them down here wherever I want. Just by doing this here, I have actually already created a video. We can actually go back here. I can hit the back button, and we can actually now play through our video here, and we can see how we go do the different views in here and play through the scenes. So it almost don't get easier than that we just can drag and drop. But even on top of that, I can grab this timeline here, and as you will see here as I'm moving it back, that I can actually just go back to wherever I want to be in my timeline. And I can also do stuff like I can control drag. So maybe I make a copy of this first thing here, because maybe what I want to show when we get to about this point here, I might want to show this screw that we see here. Just see that one being unscrewed. So maybe I just move my timeline up a couple of, maybe a second or so. And what I'm using is the same tools that you saw me use before when I exploded that cooler apart. I just grab these handles, and just to kind of like simulate, I might just pull out my screw a little bit. I can quickly, by right-clicking, go into more like a rotational mode if I also want to show this part here kind of like spinning around a little bit. And all this gets captured in here. So just by doing this, if I grab this timeline here, we will now see that when we play through it here, that it actually will come in, zoom in, and you will see the screw unscrew, and then go to the next view. So you can see here how easy it really is to insert these different things. Let's just take that last arm up here. So I'm just going to make a copy of this view here, drag my timeline over a little bit. And again, just like we saw before, I can multi-select, just like if we were inside our CAD system here. We can select things here. We can move our timeline up. So around this area right here, I would like to possibly select these, go in here and make a rotation of it. And now you will see that the handle, I can kind of like control here how big I want the handle to go up. It's going to go a little bit out of the picture, but for this instance here, I think this is fine. And now we kind of like have inserted that rotation right in there, right? So now we can kind of like see how the arm goes up. I showed before with arrows. It might also be worth pointing out as we're in here, we can also do this stuff right in the video. So I might go up here. Again, we had the arrows before, but what about like a label or something like that? We can attach this label right here, and now that label will actually appear on the table here. And again, I can take that label, I can drag a copy of it, and maybe when I get to this copy over here, I might decide that at this point here, I'm actually going to turn that label off by just change the opacity, and it will actually capture that at that point. So now, again, I got a label, and when I play through it, it will vanish away. So as you can see here, how really easy making videos inside of Composer. It is really easy to get all these different steps in here, and you can save these out in all different kinds of formats, including AVI. So really need to do that. Now, to go back and just quickly get back to our documentation here, let me just get out of my video mode, and I'm just going to turn off my timeline here. Now, so I brought in the model before that Kevin had been working on, right? One of the things that we might want to look at, if we're bringing in the first view here, now where we're getting a further step in our documentation, is we might also want to do something like a bill of material and kind of like show this more as a part list kind of stuff. Again, I'm going to go back to that we have this whole assembly structure that we brought in from Kevin's SolidWorks file. Literally, again, just by clicking on one of the components and using my left arrow, I can literally select that whole assembly. You can see it over to the left of the tree that gets selected. And this quick here, I can go in here and I can just say, show me selection, and hide the rest. Just like this here, you will see that now I have that image here. Now, again, I might go to my rendering illustration here, turn it into maybe a silhouette. That's maybe a little bit more appropriate for making like a part list type out of this here. We want to insert a bomb, so I'm going to go over here to my workshop tab. Say I want to insert a bomb, and I'm just going to select everything that is inside of this view here and show my bomb, and my bomb automatically gets populated down here. Now again, talk about the properties earlier. Down here in the lower left, I have complete control over all the different things that I could possibly want control of, right? So I can just like free dragging it here. You can see that I can kind of like make it into one list if that fits me. Maybe I want to make it a little bit bigger, right? So we can kind of like see it. I can make that kind of adjustments right here. But what is really neat about this is that I can also control what is inside of this bomb, right? So if I go over here, you will see that in my configure my columns, I have all these different properties. Now all these properties here comes out of Composer. This is what Composer reads from the imported data, but we can actually also go in here and literally pull the properties right out of the metadata, right out of what Kevin is working on over there. So maybe one of the things I want to bring in from SolidWorks is the description. So I can bring that one in. Maybe I want to bring in something like my part numbers, right? They might be nice to get in there too. And you can see that they get populated over here to the right. So maybe I just say get rid of the description in here. And maybe I want the quantity to show in the bottom of my tree here. Apply it, and you will see how that it's going to pull all this information out of the properties, the metadata in Kevin's assembly file. Now, as you can see here, it looks like that Kevin still has a little bit of work to do. The description, we're missing some of those, and he haven't come up with his part numbers yet. But at least we have started this process. We know we need to get this inside of our documentation. I can also quickly go in here, of course, and create such a thing as our call-outs. So those can be placed on our screen here. Again, you got different options in here. You can see how I can place them in here. I might go ahead here and say that I want them all to show on the top left, and they all populate that way. We also have another very neat thing in here. If I set them to free 2D, some of you SolidWorks users know that a couple of years ago, SolidWorks introduced the magnetic line in 2D drawings of SolidWorks. Well, guess where they got it from? They got it from Composer, right? So I can actually also insert one of these lines here, and now I can grab this, and it will automatically snap these different ones on. And as now they are here, I might need to go in here and kind of like clean this up a little bit. But these kind of images here, you can see how quickly I kind of like have designed these. And when I'm happy with it, what do? Well, all I do here is I snap another picture, right? And I got a new picture down here that I might, in this case here, go in and create instruction parts list, right? So I named that one that. Now, I brought in those components from Kevin, and one of the things I looked at was my cover. Now, one of the things that changed on the cover picture from my earlier documentation. Actually, why don't we just go in here and look at my earlier documentation that we created before, was that when I created my earlier documentation with my Word document, well, I didn't have that railroad track in there, right? That doesn't look right. So now when we're looking at it here, now we got that track in there, we got the other components. Maybe I'm not too happy with this. What do you do now? Well, now you would run out and get another screenshot, or you would run out, take another picture. Well, because we're inside a Composer here, I'm just going to change this image a little bit here till the way I like it. I think that looks good. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to update this image. So now you will see that the cover update is right here, right? So now that switches over. If you go up and look at some of the other ones, we can look at the first picture we created there with the turn arrow and the magnifying glass and that kind of stuff. You know, now where we added these other components in, maybe this picture, maybe we don't want it to overlay something else. We could start moving that around. I could also, at this point here, you know, do SolidWorks commands like hold down my control and hold down my middle mouse button, and you see how I can move the assembly around. So even though that I started my process earlier, I have the power to readjust all these things to the way I like it, and just again, I just go in and hit update. Let's take a look at the other image we created in here with the cooling device going out here. We saw that Kevin clearly added some other components, and I see that I have a component, a little fitting here that shows up in here, highlighted, literally just hit H on my keyboard, and I hide it inside of this documentation. That's all we really have to do. So I refreshed that image, and now I have saved that out. So really all I have to do at this point, making these few changes, is to go back into my workshop, go back into my higher resolution images here, and I can go back to my multiple, and I'm just going to resave these views out to where we saved them before, right? And just override the existing views we see in here. So let's just hit save there. And let's go out and look at you will see that the different views now here is going to be updated. Now I also get the different other views we use for other stuff like our animation and stuff like that. But you will see here how our different views gets updated. And you will also see that we will get our part list in here. Our cover already changed. And 3, 2, 1. That can view 8. Look at that. So there show up the part list. Almost like, it's like magic, right? So when I go in and look at this Word document, well, even though that we started the documentation way early in design, we have now got a design change. Check this out. Right now, my cover chain have changed. We got the part list in there. Now we know that we got to send a note to Kevin about fixing some of this metadata, but everything in here have been updated, right? So we are really just working with our file. In the process, we started much earlier. We're just updating things as we are going through our different processes here. So, I'm going to send a note back to Kevin and say, hey, I know you haven't finished up the design, but I have already started with creating videos. I have created part lists and stuff like that. So I think we should send it over to Kevin and let Kevin just fix things up as he goes through here.
All right, so back in the design phase, I still have some things to do. We know that the documentation's been started because this thing has to be shipped by the end of the week, and the documentation has to go out with it. Now, one of the things that we were looking at as we started to build the prototype is this particular bracket is insufficient, and we know that we've used a previous bracket that worked pretty well. We were going to try this new design. It didn't quite work the way we expected. So, one of the day-to-day things that you might do is replace components, where you might go in and grab a new component or a changed component and replace it with a new design within SolidWorks. Now, obviously, I'm doing this so we can illustrate what we're going to do what you're going to see in the documentation side. Also, as Lars mentioned, part of this process from a design perspective is making sure that we've got all of our custom properties of our files filled out. Not just because they'll help with documentation, but because of the document management system, the ability to be able to search on that. So if I go into my assembly visualization, if you haven't used it, is just a way of looking at an assembly to evaluate certain things associated with that assembly. And what I've done is added the columns that I always need to fill out for every part in here, description and part number. And what I can do is now start to type in the part numbers that we want to use for each of these individual components. On top of that, I would go through and fill out descriptions for each of the components in here. Anything you fill out in here is going to be filled out at the component level and be saved in the assembly. So this is a great way of going through that process. But let's take a look at how that affects Lars and his documentation.
Unmute myself, show my screen. Okay, so bringing in again when these changes being made in here, it's seamless, because really what you do is you just go under File and we go in and we say Update, SolidWorks Composer Document, and again from right in here we can literally just go to whatever folder or whatever changes was created, and we can pull in all those different file formats. In our case, of course, CAD Dimensions. We love SolidWorks, and you can bring this in here to the into our Composer document. So when I bring this document in here from Kevin, first of all, I can quickly take a look at what I have in here, and I can see here that we got, if I turn on, again, sometimes it makes it easier if we turn on some outlines here, we can see that we placing the components gets replaced in here. I do believe that when we left off before, that we had some question about some metadata, right? So we can go in here and we can quickly check that our metadata in here has been updated, and it pulls that right in from SolidWorks. So now I got them. Now I can see that the part numbers are not to be determined anymore. He put in some description in here on the different ones. So it really works very quickly. We can go in now. We can save this out again. We can bring it into our Word document and get update the part list in there, update the images and stuff like that. And of course, also we have our video we created too. So really easy to work between these two softwares and create two different entities in a company. You got the engineering part of it, where the engineer is modeling things up in SolidWorks, many times testing different things out, and then the documentation guy. You need to get the documentation out so people know how to put things together and how instruction manuals, but also it can also be for rendering for websites and stuff like that. And that's really where the Composer and the SolidWorks really work nicely together to update that kind of stuff. So I hope really that from a Composer standpoint, how easy it really is. We really took that one view and we ended up publishing all these different views that we turned into both a Word document but also into an ABI video that can be used to help explain our products, get that information out there to the users. I'm going to switch it back to Kevin here and let Kevin kind of like wrap things up here. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. Just one last item in here, just a kind of a testimonial here. JL Audio, obviously they're very big in creating items that are used in lots of different vehicles, obviously stereo systems and speakers and so on. Well, they developed speaker systems that go on Mastercraft boats, and they're using Composer today to do the documentation for this. Mastercraft saw the documentation and said it was the best owner manual they've ever seen. And just that experience for somebody to get your documents related to your products and see something, it becomes a quality experience for those people. Here is the actual original document which showed how to mount these on a particular location in the boat when the boat's being manufactured, and this is what they end up being inside of Composer. So a very dramatic difference and much better experience for the person using the documentation. So I want to thank everyone for attending today's presentation on keeping your designs up to date and synced up with SolidWorks. If there's any questions at this point, we'll take them, post them in the questions section of the GoToWebinar window. If not, we want to thank you all for coming and have a good afternoon.